Welcome to a brand new episode of We Talk Cyber with Monica, your one and only platform for real world stories from renowned global experts within security, privacy, and leadership, making a real impact every single day. In today's episode, we'll be talking to an industry leader within the cyber insurance market. So let's hop right on the episode. This is We Talk Cyber with Monica. We'll be talking to Michael Spreitzenbarth from Munich Re on why should organizations care about cyber insurances, independently whether they're from the public sector or the private sector. What are some of the biggest gotchas, loopholes, or even myths around cyber insurances? What role does cyber quantification play? And what are some of the key elements in the process of getting a cyber insurance policy for your organization? What are some of the adoption challenges that we have seen and some trends going forward? So before we hop into the episode, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel, Monica Talks Cyber. You will find all my videos there, including my podcast videos. And if you're interested in listening to the podcast audio, then please tune in and subscribe to We Talk Cyber in your favorite podcast app. Shout out to today's sponsor, Simply Cyber. If you're interested in more technical security stuff, then please check them out. Let's meet our guest right away. This is We Talk Cyber with Monica. Lovely to have you on the show today. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience, what you do, what have been your background, and maybe share a fun fact with the audience?
Of course. So from the technical background, I'm more the techie guy. I was working within a large corporation, doing incident response, doing a bit of red teaming, pen testing. Then more or less changed a bit the sides and moved to one of the largest reinsurance companies. And there now for close to 2 years did a lot of cyber underwriting and risk assessment together with the lawyers and all the other peoples involved in the cyber insurance. The fun fact, I'm not only dealing with vulnerabilities and a large amount of companies out there doing their risk assessment. I'm also a hobby beekeeper, so treating thousands of different customers, so to say, is one of my day-to-day business.
Lovely. And you're definitely the right person to be talking about cyber insurance today. So welcome to the show and let's get started.
Thanks a lot.
Let's just start with why should companies care about cyber insurance in both in public and private sector?
So the cyber insurance itself, it's one of the classical risk treatment methods. So if you're not sure how to mitigate it to the right level, or if you don't want to stop your business or the issue that's bundled with the risk, you head for another way of at least lowering the impact to your company. So the risk insurance and the cyber insurance is the classical thing to go for. And in a lot of cases, there's also, let's say, the small difference, because in a lot of cases, the people are talking about risk transfer, and we transfer everything of the risk to the insurance. Then we can do things like we want to do it. Insurance will cover for it. But in terms of the cyber insurance, you always have to think about also reputational topics and stuff like this, which will have a more long-time focused disadvantage or consequence. So therefore, it's not the 100% risk transfer to cyber insurance. It will cover for a lot of losses, but still you have some risk left within your own company that you have to deal with. And then another thing why a lot of companies are currently caring about the topic is more from the supporting act. A lot of cyber insurers bundle services with their insurance, supporting them with breach coaches, with large incident response companies that come on site and support. So it's not only about dealing with the financial consequences, but also really supporting to handle the crisis and to solve the issue faster than normally.
And why should the public sector care about it? I mean, they're not usually either they're the self-insurers or the government is the insurer here. Why should they care about cyber insurance?
That's right. And especially also when you look in Europe and in GDPR, even there, according to GDPR, they are not obliged to any kind of fines. So their risk at least from a financial perspective, is a bit lower than someone from the private sector. But also, as we know, the IT security and the awareness of the people working in public sector is often not at the same level that we know from private sector. So for them, it's even or it could be a much higher benefit to have those additional services available that on the one hand side help them to get a bit more awareness in their employee base, maybe also to support them upfront with vulnerability assessments or with mitigation strategies. But then, of course, if something happens, have the right people on board. That's something where the public sector is even more, or it's more requested from public sector than we see from private sector.
Interesting. And let's understand a bit of the elements of cyber insurances. What are you seeing in terms of adoption? What are the challenges that you've seen in terms of adoption, and especially in Europe?
So the adoption itself is quite different from if you compare US to Europe and to other parts of the world. So in Europe, we have seen that the topic of cyber insurance is in the market since a couple of years. In 2018, they already had more than 3.7 billion of revenue just from the insurance policies. In Europe, it's in the same year, it was 0.6, so much lower. And this on the one hand side is because the awareness is a bit different. In Europe, still the large corporations, they are aware that cybersecurity is something they have to deal with and they have to care about. But still there, a lot of them are thinking that they have done a lot within their own company, within their own environment, and are not sure if the insurance will help them in the end that much as an additional value. For the SME segment, it's even more on the complete awareness topic. If you ask a small or medium company in Germany or in Europe, a lot are telling you, no, why should I be a victim of a cyber attack? Nobody is interested in what I'm doing here. Nobody is interested in my data. So there's still the issue that they think, okay, everything is targeted and it's only done by criminals that really want to get data or want to create damage or losses for that one single company. This widespread and untargeted things is something that they not keep that much in mind than they should be. And that's what we see in the adoption. Throughout the last year, it also changed, or the last years, because we see now the ransomware gangs. It's more in media. We also see more and more losses happening in Germany and other companies in Europe. And that creates slowly the awareness that they start to think about, maybe cyber insurance is something they should care about.
Yeah, and I mean, rightly so, because this topic around awareness, especially with SMBs or SMEs that you're saying, is interesting one, because I usually post and blog about, and I've talked about this in many of my conversations with people, is that everybody's a potential target, either direct or indirect, or a collateral, or a step to somebody else's network. A good example of that is the Cloud Hopper attack that happened. There were the service providers that were attacked, but ultimately it caused consequence and impact over the entire world. And a lot of the companies obviously are a part of, even if not direct target, they're a part of some kind of collateral, or as I said, part of a step to somebody else's network. So it's everybody should really be caring and worrying about it, that it's they could be one of them as well. So just this whole awareness around it could not be me is a big myth that we need to break and help companies break. And talking about myths, another thing that I've also heard with terms of cyber insurance and my experience is that the companies that are actually, or some of the companies that think of cyber insurance, they think of it in more in sense of either or. Like you said, right? I mean, lots of
Yeah.
organizations are like, okay, we have controls in place. We need cyber insurance, but also the other way around is I've seen that they go like, okay, now that I'm getting cyber insurance, I probably don't need to care so much more about my internal security programs and governance and so on. What are your experiences with it? Is it really either or what would be your recommendations around it to organizations?
It totally depends on the size of the company. If you go for the large corporations, then it's definitely not a either or. They are going for cyber insurance because they are searching the worst case that could happen, and therefore they need a kind of a risk transfer and the insurance. That means they go for very high limits, for very high deductibles, so that they have to pay themselves in any case of a loss, and really only want to have the insurance for the huge things that could happen, the next NotPetya, stuff like this. But then you also have the SME segment, and there it's often really a either or. And that also depends on the prices, because for the kind of premiums that the insurance puts on the table, they can't do a in-depth risk assessment. So we are speaking about 600 euros per year for cyber insurance. Therefore, you can't set someone on the table that discusses 2 hours how the IT security within the company looks like, and really do an in-depth assessment. So in the end, for the insured, it's also the decision, okay, I can now upgrade all my IT systems to the newest versions, can get an MSSP or a kind of service provider that supports me in patching, hardening my systems. That will cost thousands of euros per year. Or I get the cyber insurance. That's half the price, or even less. And if something happens to me, I will get covered somehow. At least the financial impact will be covered. So there we unfortunately really see this either or thinking. I personally don't like it. I think a lot in the insurance market see it similar. And of course, the IT security community sees it with the same danger behind it, because then you suddenly start to not improve the IT security of the market, but just bring everything in the insurance, which doesn't help the community and the overall market. It's just transfers everything to the insurance.
Yeah, plus also it's not a replacement for increasing your security maturity over time. You're
Yep.
not becoming more mature in terms of security governance, and something that will, I believe, will be a part of it today already is, with all the digitalization that's happening and with the physical, digital, and biological worlds coming and converging, coming together and converging. It's going to be even more integrated into our daily lives. And how do then the SMEs as well go about just buying an insurance and not thinking in long term of maturity? So that's very fascinating, and we'll see how that turns out to be in the coming years. But with regards to the ones that are then having cyber insurance, either small companies, SMEs, or large corporations, just like any other insurance, insurance obviously have terms and conditions. There are certain like loopholes sometimes, and there are certain wordings and certain things that people
Yep.
should be caring about. So, what, in your opinion, are some of the key things that you've been seeing in terms of an understanding towards how these are underwritten and what kind of loopholes there can be?
So the toughest discussions is always about the wording of the insurance policy, because normally the insurance policies are written by lawyers. They are not really aware of all the technical meanings of the terms that they are using. So they are doing what a classical lawyer is doing. They are searching for definitions that had been proven in front of court, or where they think they have been proven in front of court or are stable enough. And that's then often the point of contradiction, because you have now the IT security person from the company that wants to buy an insurance sitting opposite to a lawyer that tells them what is written in the insurance policy, and then they suddenly start to discuss if their IT network is really bundled under the word computer system, or if anything is missing from the terminology and from the definition. And especially when you then go to manufacturing companies, it's getting a real tough issue, because now the company itself is speaking about IT and OT, and understands that these two worlds are getting connected to each other, but from the technology and the security, they are totally different. But from the insurance industry, there's only computer system. So is OT
Interesting.
covered? Is it not? that are the toughest discussions that I've seen throughout the last years. While a lot insurance companies still think that within their policies, they are not covering the robot down in the manufacturing line, because that's not a computer system. But the company that wants to get the protection, of course, sees this as one of the computer systems. And so that's really something I would give it as an advice. Have a look at the definitions within your policy and really check them word for word, and do not think that just because you know what a computer system is, also the cyber insurer has the same meaning for that term. So that's really an important part. And then, as with all the insurances, have a look at the exclusions. Within a lot of them, you find classical exclusions like that your ISP is excluded. So if that one has an issue and is not able to provide you with internet any longer, then this is not a reason for you to claim your business interruption according to the cyber policy. And the same applies for the more or less famous war exclusion.
Yeah, the act of war, right?
We luckily haven't seen any large issues with that, with a cyber policy, but we all know the cases from common property insurances, where then in the end the insurer is not that willing to pay, and is trying to claim the exclusion. This, as mentioned, luckily is not the case within the cyber insurance market as far as I've seen. They often say even targeted attacks, nation state sponsored, they don't see it as a real war act. And with this still cover it. But there you will have discussions if a next NotPetya or something will come around the corner. And therefore really be careful what's in the exclusions and in the definitions.
In addition to these exclusions and loopholes are things that people should be taking into consideration before underwriting, what are some of the key elements that you believe are important to have done or the company should know of before they underwrite insurance?
So on the one hand side, really understand your risks. So do the proper risk management within your company. So really know which risks do I have, how likely are they, what are potential impact if they materialize, because only then you can see if the cyber insurance is really the right thing and if the policy fits. Within cyber insurance, you have a large amount of different coverage elements. You have the classical business interruption topic. You have data breach, but even within data breach, you have a lot of different subsets that are different from cyber insurer to cyber insurer. And therefore, it's really important to understand what exactly is your risk. Is it for example, if you're talking about the data breach, is it the fine that is your most fear of, that you get from state or from the authority? Is it the PCI monitoring costs or recertification costs? What really is the driver for your loss and for your risk, and then really map it to the insurance coverage. Because even there, you find coverage elements that from the name seem to fit, but looking in the details, there can be a huge difference from policy A to policy B. So therefore, really doing a solid risk assessment within your company is a good thing. And with this, also know your numbers. So understand what it means for you as a company if your factory is down for 1, 2, 3 days. What does this mean in terms of missed revenue, of losses, maybe also of penalties from contractual liabilities? Bring this on the table when the cyber insurer is there, because often they assume a lot of those values based on former losses they have seen, or sometimes even just take your turnover divided by 365, multiply it with the time frame they think you are offline after an incident, and this is then the value that they are using. And if you want to have a more realistic premium and a more realistic approach, really show them your calculations and your numbers, because then you can learn from each other, and at the same time you get the more, let's say, the more suitable insurance policy for yourself and the less generic and broad policy.
And what you mentioned now is quite interesting in terms of understand your losses and be able to have a tangible figure around it. It doesn't have to be an exact, accurate figure, but maybe a bracket or an understanding of where it would lie in terms of loss revenue, direct and indirect losses, and so on. And as you said in the beginning, I mean, reputational loss you can't really get rid of anyway. But barring that, what other kind of direct or indirect losses you could have? But we've seen historically, organizations are really not quantifying cyber risk. That is a big challenge. Also in the finance sector, which I see is very interesting because finance sector is doing quantification of all the other kinds of risks, but there are very few companies in the world that actually do proper cyber risk quantification. What are your experiences and thoughts on that, and what are your recommendations if somebody wants to start with that?
My experience is quite similar. We see that the larger ones, for parts of their risks, they can tell you the numbers. They did risk quantification, but for our others, they have no idea. And especially if it comes to the data breach topic, even though they are dealing with a large amount of health data, of personal customer data, they are still unaware what it really would mean if there would have been, or if there would happen a data breach to them. And that's the thing that I mentioned, where they can learn from each other and from the insurance industry, because they have seen a lot of those losses already and can, with that, at least get a rough estimate what it means if you lose 20,000 of credit card data sets, or if you lose patient data or something like this. So they can support you to get in the right direction to understand what the loss would mean, and with this start doing the risk quantification. But at the same time, for things like an outage of your business or something, there you often, as a company owner or as a company itself, you have the better truth behind the data, so to say, or the better data set itself. So there it's really look at your numbers, try to figure out which of the risks you can somehow measure. And even there, it's not about to really make it precise, that it's enough to have a rough estimation behind it, and then try to search the exchange. And therefore, not only with the cyber insurance, there are a lot of communities out there from the IT security, but also from other kind of business environments that are really interested in doing this exchange. And therefore, every company that currently has no idea how to quantify their risks, or wants to get a, let's say, a second opinion if they did it the right way, try to get out to one of those communities, or approach your insurer and start the discussion with him what he thinks, how realistic those numbers are.
Let's go back to the whole trends part of cyber claims and cyber insurance. Some real examples. What have you seen in terms of the top cyber attacks or cyber types of cyber attacks or cyber incidents that have actually caused cyber claims? What have you seen in terms of that?
It really fits to what you see in news and media throughout the last couple of months or years. So you've seen the large data breaches. Don't name names here or companies here, but some of them are quite obvious, and everybody has them in the back of their mind. So a lot of them also had been covered by cyber insurance. They had been supported throughout the incident response, the whole credit card monitoring, PCI recertification, stuff like this was paid by cyber insurers. And then, of course, especially looking currently in US, the ransomware cases. We see a lot of cases where now the insurance is paying because the company was victim of one of the large ransomware gangs. And then it's the twofold topic. It's on one hand side, helping them to recover and also to get their business up and running again. But at the same time, they support the victim with ransom negotiation parties and breach coaches that then support them to deal with the bad guys, and at the same time also to manage the reports to media, to law enforcement, to authorities, to really have all that you have to do to support in there to not miss anything just because you're in the emergency mode and don't think currently about informing law enforcement or sending the report to the state of authority or something like this.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, what's happening really a lot in the way the cyber threat landscape is changing, and it makes sense to see that also as a trend towards cyber claims, basically, that are happening.
Yep.
What do you think are the trends going forward, especially around the adoption, and how do you see the cyber insurance world and the trend with regards to that changing going forward, especially for Europe?
What we have seen in recent years is already that the adoption rate goes up. So it seems that awareness is slowly getting more mature or is broadening. On the one hand side, of course, you see a lot of insurers going into the market because the estimations for the market are quite high. So everybody wants to get a piece of the cake. And with this, you also do kind of awareness, because if the second salesperson is sitting in your office and telling you, have you ever thought about cyber security and claims resulting out of it? Maybe it starts also within your head to think a bit more, maybe that's something I should start to take into consideration. And so we have seen this on the one hand side. But on the other hand, we now also see a lot of those ransomware losses happening in Germany and in Europe that make it to the media. We have the one unfamous case with the hospital where even the person died because of a ransomware attack. So that starts now that a lot of people really change their mindset and think, okay, maybe it's not that the attackers are really targeting me or my company. It's just because I'm there. Yeah? Just because my system was the next one they found on their list without even knowing who's behind it. And that makes brings up the adoption rate and also strengthens a bit the market that the insurance is bought more often.
Lovely. I think we've talked a lot about why of cyber insurance and what it actually entails, and what are some of the examples of kinds of cyber insurances are you seeing? Is it like are organizations getting like pure cyber insurances, or is it more in terms of P&L and part of their insurances?
So in the past, I think it was more combination. They sometimes had their property insurance and then just tried to get an extension for cyber in there. But with this, we have also seen all the law cases now suddenly, because there was kind of a misunderstanding what that extension was really covering and whatnot. And what the market now does is they publish clear exclusions that are now bundled into the property world or casualty world, to really state that cyber is not covered in those and make it a dedicated field for the insurance, which makes it easier on the one hand side for the insurance, because now they have dedicated people there that can really try to assess the cyber risk and that do not need to think about what's the exposure to fire or to flood or something. And on the other hand, it also helps the company because they can more clever invest, let's say, because often the cyber losses are high but way lower than the property losses. If your whole factory burns down, that means immense losses for a long time. If you have a ransomware, there could be a high loss in the first place, but the recovery phase is much quicker than building up a new building, getting all the equipment back in there. And that also helps the companies to more wisely invest the money there.
Fantastic. I think we had really lovely conversations today and learned a lot about what's actually happening in the cyber insurance world and how it would go forward. So thank you so much for that. Would you like to maybe just say a key message to the audience based on our conversations?
So my key message would really be to don't think that much in the either or. Really look at your own stuff, try to get your own maturity to a proper level, and then use the insurance as a risk transfer as it was intended in the beginning. That's the only thing that will help in the long term. And that's the only thing to bring the community and the security out there to a more mature level at all.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. It was so lovely to have you on the podcast show today. We had really lovely conversations. Thank you again, really very much for that.
Thanks a lot, Mon, for inviting me.
That was today's episode of We Talk Cyber with Monica. So I'll be back with more episodes, fantastic guests, and amazing conversations. Until then, keep tuning in, take care, and stay safe.